So what up, though? We're back with another episode of Speak for Yourself. And of course, we have Ken Elkins in the building.
What's happening?
And a very special guest, our neighbor, the leader of Pure Heart Foundation, Sherelle Hogan.
Hello, hello, hello.
So we like to start it off by inviting our guests to introduce themselves. We may say something that, where we miss something that's really important and key to you. Mm-hmm. So how would you like for our guests to know you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, obviously, my name is Sherelle Hogan. I have the honor and privilege of being the CEO and founder of Pure Heart. I'm an author, right? I'm a speaker. I'm a mom to be, so I'm really excited to add that, I guess, title.
Congratulations.
Yes, but most importantly, I am a huge woman of faith. Wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God. So that's really important for me to add.
That's good. Mm-hmm. I'm in the mood to talk about faith today, more than usual. But how about we start with Pure Heart Foundation and what made, you birthed Pure Heart Foundation?
That's a
Did you
long
say that because
question.
she's pregnant? Is that why you use the word birth?
I thought about it as I was saying, like, you know what I mean? Is this a good choice of words in these circumstances? It's like, but, hey.
I'm roll with it.
It's a mom to be, and she's,
It was poetic. I like the way you
Yeah,
got
no,
it.
it was,
cool.
right?
You.
It was.
But I didn't mean to bother.
Well, you did. You
Oh,
just
no,
jacked the whole thing.
it was perfect. It was perfect. A short answer is pain, my own lived experience, but then also just awareness of recognizing that young people in the city of Detroit was so forgotten, right? I did a lot of research just around children with incarcerated parents, how they were being supported, who was showing up for them. And unfortunately, when I found out about the stats, it was no organization doing this work. And if they were doing this work, it was in a very eventful way that didn't really break down those barriers and address the root cause of some of the trauma that young people experience when they have a parent incarcerated. And that's what led me to go forth with it. But initially it started from me being hungry for purpose. I was working in corporate America, miserable at my job, and I began to pray and ask God, like, what do you want me to do? Because all of the things that I experienced as a child leading up to where I am now professionally doesn't really align. And I want to be centered in your will. And when I began to pray and ask him that direction, he responded in a way that I didn't anticipate him to, and he told me to quit my job. And I was just like, oh, okay, you want me to quit my job. So, like, how do I supposed to, pay my bills? And, and I would never forget what he spoke to me. He said, if I kept you then, what makes you think I wouldn't keep you now? And you're doing something for me. And you know me, right? And we're getting to know each other. I will move and shake on faith. And I quit my job 2 weeks ago. 8 years, here we are.
Nice. Wow. 2 weeks ago, 8 years ago.
No, wait.
2 weeks.
Did I mix that
said
up?
2 weeks
ago.
No. So I quit 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later.
Now
8 years ago.
8 years here.
8 years ago.
Right. So, yes.
And then it's interesting when we look at where here is, like you're saying, you stepping out on faith. So I remember I think started at Marigold around about the same time.
Yes.
Right. And both of us having, a small space. And then now, I think you got like 8 floors here now, don't you?
We do not
all
have 8
times
floors.
All
We do not have 8 floors.
Partners that are decorated rooms. I mean, here is lovely for you right now, right? But I add that just to lift up and elevate you stepping out on faith, right? And being able to do that. And that faith, where that faith has gotten you, right? And what the work that you're doing for young people. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Say that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it is amazing to watch as we lead an organization that is geared to provide funding for Black entrepreneurs in the city of Detroit, and us seeing the support that you've been able to garner over the last couple of years since I've come into contact with you. It's really exciting, right? So to hear you tie and connect faith in there, I know that there's a lot of people out there that have faith that run impactful like organizations and initiatives, but there must be something about the infrastructure and the way that you're moving, kind of coupled with the faith, to set you up well. At least that's an assumption of what I assume from the outside, knowing what I know about Pure Heart Foundation, but knowing what I know about the way the ecosystem works. So can you talk a little bit about that? What does that look like to do the work, to put yourself in position to get some of the yeses that you've gotten from funders?
Absolutely. So my mentor, who actually now is my director of operations, his name is Keith Bennett. When I met him probably like 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, because Pure Heart was just still a thought. I barged into his office when he was running Flip the Script years ago. And at the time, he was the best in the reentry space. So I went to his office and I said, I want to be the best in this space. So what do I need to do, right? Teach me, because I honestly didn't know anything about the nonprofit sector. The only thing that I knew is I had parents incarcerated and I wanted to help these young people. And the first thing that he told me to do was to fall in love with sacrifice as a leader. And at the time, I'm like 25 years old, so I'm still partying, I'm still hanging out with my friends, I still have my own life. And he says, what time do you wake up in the morning? And I said, about 8, 9 o'clock, I go to my office and I grind it out. He said, oh, no, you're not ready. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you know what time I get in my office every morning? I was like, well, 8, 9 o'clock. What's wrong? He said, I get here at 5:30. And my staff doesn't get here until 8. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I want you to meet me here for 90 days at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I'll decide if I mentor you or not. I woke up every morning for 90 days. I still get up at 5 in the morning, but that gave me sacrifice, right? It made me fall in love with sacrifice, but it also gave me structure and discipline. So now by 5 o'clock, I'm up, I'm writing. If I'm going after a proposal, by 8 o'clock, I've already submitted a grant. Now I'm, on my day working with my team, but it just gave me that motivation to understand as a leader, it's my responsibility to work harder, right? And I fell in love with that process. And then also the second profile thing he told me is you have to position yourself to be blessed. And for a long time, I didn't understand what it meant, because I'm like, I'm going after funding. We're being told, no, I'm not getting in certain, rooms and things like that. And that nature is happening. And he was like, okay, well, do you have this, that, and the third? And I'm like, I don't. And he was like, so how can you expect them to give you what you're asking for? So I stopped asking, and I made sure that Pure Heart had the necessary things that we needed in order for us to go to a funder or to, go after funding to the point where they couldn't say no, they just say how much.
Yeah.
And,
so what are a couple of those things, right? Like, I don't want to park here, but I do want to, for the sake of anybody that's kind of in that infancy stage, right? What are a couple of those things that you needed to make sure that Pure Heart had?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, logic models, right?
Okay.
We can design programming, but if we can't spell out what the actual outcomes, objectives, tactics, things that we need in order to implement programming and structuring it on paper, a funder doesn't understand what you're, seeking to do, right? So I quickly learned how to develop logic models, strategic plans, very itemized budgets. I think something else, we have pitch decks for every type of program that we have to provide to funders. And then we also make sure that we research the funder, right? So if this funder loves community service, we're going to build a proposal around community service, but still make sure that we still reach the outcomes that we need to see as an organization. So those are some of the things that we do, or that I do. And then I also, I always provide a very compelling narrative, right? Like some funders want to see numbers and statistics, then there's some funders that really want to understand the work, because if we be honest, most of the funders that we go after don't understand the work, right? Or they're not in the work. So getting them to understand it are some of the things that we do too.
Oh, that is good.
As you talked earlier about, being comfortable with sacrifice, right, and getting to that point. And now, as you're becoming a new mom, the organization, is moving. How do you prepare yourself for this next stage, where now giving more to yourself, right? We just our last guest talked a lot about that, right? A lot about healing and really coming in one with yourself. How do you prepare yourself for that next stage to prepare to be better to yourself, to be better with your young person, with your kid, and not work so hard on the business? Because I know that can be difficult when you've been doing it for so long.
Yes.
So how do you do that?
I would be lying if I said I have that all figured out. I'm figuring it out as the days go by. But when I first found out that I was pregnant, I was so excited, right? I've always wanted to be a mother, and I've had some medical complications that deemed me to believe that I wouldn't be here. So I'm extremely grateful. But then on the other spectrum of that, I was mourning because I knew I would have to transition. I would have to step away. And in that process, I found out that we lacked infrastructure. More so that if I stepped away, what does Pure Heart look like? And then I had to have a very hard conversation with my director of operations, because he says, well, you do this still when I'm supposed to be doing that. And it really showed me how much I'm so intertwined with the organization. And if we're trying to create a healthy pathway to sustainability for the organization, I need to step away. So it kind of is, a huge blessing in disguise, because now that I am pregnant, we're forced to build that infrastructure. So I'm literally the smallest things I'm putting on paper so that I can just hand it, when I do step away. So that's how I'm preparing professionally. But mentally, I'm just giving myself grace, because I have been experiencing work guilt. Just not being able to, be everything to Pure Heart has truly been challenging for me, because my daughter, obviously, she'll be born into something totally different from the scholars that we support. And I don't ever want the scholars or even just Pure Heart to feel just my absence. So mentally, I'm navigating through that, because some of our families, Pure Heart is all they know. And I just want to make sure that the organization is secure enough so when I do leave, they won't feel my absence.
As I hear you say that, my thought kind of goes to the young person that's, one of your scholars. And, Ken and I have shared probably on here and off camera some of, the things that we experienced growing up. And a lot of times, those things are embarrassing, right? It's like I didn't spend a lot of time talking to some of my friends about some of, the struggles at the crib, but like you lived this, your story very publicly, and I imagine some of the kids, have that, sting of embarrassment and whatnot. What is it like when you are able to connect with them and they're like, man, like there's somebody that I can talk to that's not going to trip? They may have one parent, you have both parents, you know what I mean? So they may be able to connect with you. What's without going into details of a story or whatnot, like what does that look like when you make that connection with one of your scholars?
It's kind of honestly unexplainable. It's like this emotional attachment automatically. Because I honestly, to this day, and I'm 32 now, unless you had a parent incarcerated, you just won't understand, because a person that had a parent incarcerated trying to articulate it is almost impossible. So it's like this blind spoken understanding that I have with the scholars, that we can look at each other a certain way and just understand that feeling. And I think that's what makes the organization just so powerful, because I am, leading from a lived experience. And I, in Pure Heart, more so, have created an organization that embraces the fact that they have a parent incarcerated, while society kind of shuts them out, right? So they're no longer embarrassed. They no longer feel that stigma or that shame that's associated with it because we see them, right? And then we also acknowledge the fact that, yeah, you know, sometimes we only talk to mom or dad for 15 minutes, or, you know, sometimes it takes 8 hours to spend 1 hour with mom or dad, but we don't shame, you know, them for their circumstances. We just speak to the fact that they were able to communicate and were able to see them, right? So I think it's just this unspoken attachment that we're able to kind of relate to each other.
It's interesting as you talk through that, because you answered a question for me. I remember I had a conversation with a young man before, because of course I didn't have a dad, right? So this person had a father, but you know, his father wasn't really there, you know. And so we would have conversations like, well, not necessarily who situation was the worst, but it was really like a conversation. Well, at least you had a father. Yeah, but at least you didn't know who your father was. I knew who mine was.
Yeah.
And he would never showed up. You know what I mean? So he's like, it's just opening each other's eyes to each other's situation, right? And so, hearing you say that, I'm like, wow. You know, when you look at having a parent incarcerated, because like when you say that, if you haven't had a parent incarcerated, you wouldn't know what it feels like. I'm like, she's right. I don't know what it feels like, right? And so hearing you describe it helped me understand that a lot clearer. You know, when you can only talk to your parent, you know, for a little bit, or, you know, the other things that you described. So thank you for assisting with that. But it is important for people who don't have a parent incarcerated to understand what the young people are going through, and not just the support for the young people, but the understanding for us as well, right? So
Absolutely.
I think that's very important. How important is that to help people understand what the young people are going through?
Oh, it's so important, and I think it's mainly important for people to just be more self-aware to their privilege, because mass incarceration is an epidemic, right? And if you haven't had a parent incarcerated or was impacted by the criminal justice system, you do have a privilege, because so many, especially Black and brown families, are impacted by it, right? And sometimes if you're not in that space, it's so easy to be oblivious to it, right? And the smallest things can trigger a scholar that has a parent incarcerated. Like on Father's Day, if you know a scholar have a parent incarcerated, you're not going to say, oh, what you doing for Father's Day, right? And even though that's something so small, so normal, because it's a holiday that everyone acknowledges, right? But to that scholar, it's like you ruined probably their whole day, because now they're reminded again that they can't see their parent that's incarcerated because it's Father's Day, right? So it's just being more self-aware so that you can be gentle to that young person, because it's so many different layers and dynamics that they have to navigate through.
And so does your organization also offer services for young people once their parent is no longer incarcerated, like helping them adapt to that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So we have a family reunification component to our motto.
Again?
Family reunification.
Okay.
And the purpose of it is to keep the scholars connected to their parent that's incarcerated while they're incarcerated, but ultimately start the healing journey of the family dynamic, right? Because we see this word reunification as when they reunify, now they're whole. But the way that I see it is, if a parent is incarcerated broken and a scholar is incarcerated broken, when they come home, all they're doing is meeting each other at their trauma, right? So we try to take the approach to make sure that parents incarcerated have access to resources, parenting classes, therapy, right? And then our scholars have the same thing on the outside. So when they do come back, it's a realistic expectation there, and they can begin to, you know, continue to heal their journey. But our newest initiative that haven't been implemented yet, but we just secured a partnership with MDOC that would allow us to go inside the facility, do parenting classes to the incarcerated parent, and then also when they come home, be able to provide services as well.
Nice. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to, you know, touch a little bit about on what you led with, right? You said a woman of faith. So, I mean, you talked about like some of the early conversations you had with God about, you know, what's next and what you should be doing, and got some insight and instruction. What else would you like to share with the listeners just about how your faith plays out in your life and who you are and what you do at Pure Heart Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. My faith plays a huge role. Like, since I was a little girl, some of my experiences, I found myself in, all I had literally was God. I can remember being a little girl in my journal writing, like, God, I don't know how you're going to fix it. I don't know when things will get better, but I trust you and I know things will get better. And that has always been just my mentality, and my faith is to trust God. And my favorite scripture is Romans 8:28, right? All things work together. So the good, the bad, everything, right? And God has shown himself to be so worthy, that because every bad thing that I have seen or felt or endured, he has somehow turned it around and it worked out for my good. Even when moments I don't understand, right?
Can we have an example?
Yes.
Please give us an example.
Well, I mean, the most obvious example is growing up with both parents incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
And
Something amazing was birth.
Right? All of that.
I used birth.
Every time you look at her belly, you say birth.
I didn't.
You look at it, birth.
But yeah, I mean, so that, right? And then Pure Heart coming from it. Never did I think that I would be doing this work. And at the capacity that I'm doing it at, right? It's so many other examples I can give, but since we mentioned birth, right? So I was diagnosed with endometriosis stage 4, and it's a condition that causes a lot of pain to women, and it impacts their reproductive system. And the doctor told me, you probably won't be able to get pregnant and blah, blah, blah. And because of that, I started a blog for women with endometriosis called Unbalanced Scars. Because typically when you have this condition, you have to have multiple surgeries and you get all of these marks that's kind of imbalanced all over your stomach. So that's why I named it that. And it has created this community of women who embrace, their circumstances, but it gives them an extra layer of faith. And now that I'm pregnant, it has really just elevated the blog, because so many women are striving, right, to become pregnant. Right. So it's like we could talk all day about some of the things that I've felt like was unfair, that I didn't deserve to experience. God still turning it around to work out. So
beautiful. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you're an author as well. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So I wrote a book called The Prisoner's Kid. Again, that was a faith thing, because God said, okay, now that you're doing the work, people need to really understand why you do the work. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? He said, write a book, tell all your business, right? And I'm like, I don't want to do that, but I'm so happy I did, right? I was obedient, and I wrote the book, The Prisoner's Kid. And I had to really dig deep and relive all of my trauma in order to birth, I use the word birth, in order to birth what God needed through the book. And because of that, I've, was able to go on a national book tour. So I go inside facilities and tell my stories to parents. My book is a part of the criminal justice syllabus at University of Michigan. Wow. So students are now learning about the work through my story. So again, God using and turning, something around for my good. So that is the book. The book really highlights my life journey. But I am going to write another book very soon to talk about the work through Pure Heart.
That's amazing. You just mentioned 3 or 4 examples where you said where God, you mentioned earlier the good and the bad. Everything goes together. That's what you mentioned earlier. You just mentioned 4 examples where the bad has shown good. Yes. Maybe not for you, but for others.
Yes.
Which is super important.
Yes.
Right? So that is just amazing story. So awesome. And so now when you mentioned a speaker, so that's because you're speaking. Are you speaking in the prison system as well, or is it primarily to families? Like, what are some of your speaking engagements?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's pretty general. So
it's an average question.
He's just upset
Because
he didn't birth it. I want to use birth too. Terrible. Y'all ain't the only one to get to use it.
No, so I speak in different capacities, right? I speak at churches, through testimony, right? Through ministry. I do lectures now at U of M, so that's pretty fun to do. I speak inside prison facilities. I speak on panels. I speak on amazing podcasts like this one that I'm on today, right? So yeah, I speak in different capacities, but I would deem myself an expert talking about children of incarcerated parents. And then I also just use my personal testimony as well for different speaking opportunities.
Wonderful.
This is good. What else? What should we cover that we haven't tapped into?
Let's actually take one of our topics.
Oh yeah. So
okay.
you get to choose. We have these topics: angry black woman. So the way that works is, you know how oftentimes people want to throw us in the category of angry black man, angry black woman. What we do here is we say it's okay to be angry, right? It's like, you're allowed to be angry but not sin, right? But what we like to do is say, look, like we are angry. Angry is one of the emotions that I carry at times, but we have things to be angry about. So I'm not going to be shamed, and you're not going to weaponize the term angry black man to keep me from being angry when I should be angry. The other one is code switching, and we don't know exactly what we are trying to say about that. One of the things that I think made us put that there is because of the frustration of how much we are police ourselves from being ourselves when we walk into spaces. As black as Detroit is, we still walk into spaces and like, hey, let me, put on my the unblack or the version of me that makes other people a lot more comfortable. You know what I mean? And then Jon Snow is a reference to
You Know Nothing, Jon Snow.
You Know Nothing, Jon Snow. Did you watch what's it called?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
I have never watched an episode.
All right. Don't put the baby through that. Make sure you don't watch it, especially when you're carrying a baby. And then I got to fight every night just to prove my love. So 5 heartbeats, maybe.
I love 5 heartbeats.
And explain You Know Nothing, Jon Snow, though, because it's a
great topic. The You Know Nothing, Jon Snow is it's a cultural reference. Jon Snow was one of the the main character in the show, and there was a point when he was kidnapping, or like he had this lady that was in essence supposed to be his enemy. He had her as his captive, and then it flipped around and he ended up being her captive. But while he had her as his captive, he just had ideas about so many things, and she would just be like, as he would say something that he thought was just solid, she'd be like, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." And she would just do that for about a few episodes. As they would cut back to them, she would just say that over and over and over to him. So that is hey, I had an idea on something at one point, and I look back and it's like, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So that's You Know Nothing, Jon Snow. Or somebody else, somebody else got their flag in the sand on this issue, and you like, you really don't know what you're talking about.
You could have lived that. You didn't have to tell the whole show.
I ain't tell the whole show. I tell
you could just land with that.
Stop trying to police my. See, this is what makes me angry. If I was to do an angry black man right now, this is what it would be about. But anyway, so. Okay. And you're familiar with the I Gotta Fight Every Night just to prove my love. So that would be about something that you often find yourself fighting for, to prove your love for a people, a group, or a thing.
So the 3 topics: angry black woman, You Know Nothing, Jon Snow, or every night I gotta prove my love, right?
I gotta fight every night just to prove my love. I gotta fight every
night just to prove my love. Which one of those 3?
You know what? Surprisingly enough, I'm gonna go with You Know Nothing.
Jon Snow. I love it.
I knew she love it. That's all I wanted you to.
That's good.
I knew
That's good.
I felt it coming out of
it. Yeah. Okay. Good. So why? Now I break it down. Why?
I'll set it up. Okay. And then you can do it.
Just set it up,
dude.
She know.
Well, the audience need. This is a segment.
You're right, bro. I'm sorry.
I want to hit him with something right now. Just like, we got the baby here. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't want to be a bad example for the baby. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be, they're going to be like, what was that, Mom? You're like, I'm the only one supposed to be kicking around.
Feel the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Got the baby here.
So, you're going to do I Know Nothing Jon Snow. So, Jon Snow is a reference to one of the main characters in Game of Thrones. And what is your You Know Nothing Jon Snow topic?
Yeah, so my topic for You Know Nothing Jon Snow is Pure Heart, right? So many people think that Pure Heart is this multi-million-dollar organization because of, I guess, the perception, right? So we have huge donors, not even, well, they are huge, right? But they have even larger platforms, right? So it's easy to think, right, and have this misconception of the organization's budget and what we're able to do. And that is least the case, right? We still have our highs and we still have our lows as an organization. And you literally know nothing, Jon Snow, right? Because Pure Heart still have to go aggressively after funding, right? Although our amazing, supporters have these large platforms, they're not covering our entire budget, right? They're donating a portion to our budget. So no, we are not a multi-million-dollar organization yet, right? We still struggle to do this work, right?
So cut some checks to Pure Heart Foundation.
Cut some checks to Pure Heart.
And don't come looking for a check from Pure Heart Foundation.
And don't come looking for a check from Pure Heart.
Right.
Yeah, and that's something that I even had to learn to navigate through as a leader, because I've literally met with funders and they say, yeah, we selected another organization to give to because we didn't think Pure Heart needed it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, because you were just
You
on
saw
the
announcement,
right? And
Right.
I'm like, oh no, we
but
we
you
still
did get my
need
budget,
funding.
right? You
Right?
got the
Right?
budget that I
Yeah.
provided you, and you saw that was just a
Exactly.
drop in the bucket.
Exactly. So I can just imagine just what community supporters or just anyone in general may think because of the perception. And I've even was told, like, they think we have more funding because our website is so nice. And I was like, we can't have a nice, polished website.
Oh my goodness!
That's what we supposed to have.
We're
Oh, my
supposed to
goodness.
have that, right?
Right.
But literally, You Know Nothing Jon Snow.
Okay,
was gonna be my first.
so to the people that think that Pure Heart Foundation is balling out of control,
Yes.
to the people that think that Pure Heart Foundation should be giving them money, to the funders that are like, oh,
You don't need
your
it.
website is so tight, you must not need any contributions from us. Look into that mirror, to that camera right there, and tell them.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Okay.
Perfect.
That's
Perfect.
perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. And it's interesting too that she just closed it with that. But with that, I want to add, and this is like to the both of you, when you have money coming in, people assume that you don't have to continue to work hard
Exactly.
to get additional funding, right? Like, oh, you got money coming in, it just must. No, sometimes you got to work harder.
You got to work
It's like
harder.
you just said, now you have to show the case that I still need funding, right? That
Right,
we still
and
need
sustain
funding,
it.
Yes.
right? And sustain it versus to those who figure, well, y'all good. So, I know both of you are great fundraisers, so I just know how difficult that is as well. When people assume, oh, you good. They don't have to do any work. No, I watch him work very hard, and you be over there chilling, so I don't know how hard you be working. but from your story, I'm assuming you working hard too.
Well, see, technically, my office is in the student center, so that's why y'all don't see
But you
me.
see, he don't just his hate is not just for me. You know what I mean? He'll spread it to the guests as well. So
I gave her an opportunity to tell me.
you know nothing,
nothing.
John.
You know
Right.
nothing. You know what? And I missed my moment. I missed my
missed your
moment.
He is Jon Snow for real.
No, I love that though. I love
That's
that.
good. So how many youth are you serving? How many scholars are you? Is Pure Heart Foundation serving annually nowadays?
Yes. So this year we have 193 active scholars.
193 active scholars.
Yes.
Active
scholars, and we have 296 in our database that's yet to been served.
So so you tell me that's a waiting list. Mm-hmm. That's a waiting list. 290 what? 96 people is the waiting list.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's amazing.
Bless you for the work that you're doing. Bless the baby. Bless the mothers that are part of the community that you've been, purposed to create. Mm-hmm. And I will be praying that many more of them will have the testimony that you have with the baby. And we just look forward to watching you and your family and your team at Pure Heart Foundation continue to do the work that God has called you to do.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. Thank you. It's
no doubt.
Truly an honor.
Yeah. Sorry that you had to deal with Ken.
Yeah, because he knew nothing.
He knows nothing. I know. Well, look, y'all done hung out with us for another episode of Speak for Yourself, and you've heard from Sherelle Hogan, and we're going to let her out of here so she can go finish her day. Peace.